the house.
Yeah.
They weren't to be present amongst the men.
But now we are modern. We are modern. We're talking about 35-year-old people.
It is things they are not easily breaking away from. Because even when you want to break away from them, they don't know. I mean, you're still finding me holding a man accountable, and the man comes up to say, well, it is still known that a man is superior. Like, shut up. Be accountable. Be accountable. Be a human being.
Yeah.
Like, beyond, okay, maybe you're a man and you want to put up your manhood as the superior thing. What does your manhood bring on the table? Brokenness, unaccountability, promiscuity. I don't think I would want to relate with that kind of manhood.
Right.
Is that a root, or is it a symptom?
Is that what?
Brokenness. Like,
it's a symptom of the system.
So what is at the root of the system?
Society.
Lauren, speak into this.
Yeah, she's speaking from like when she was saying earlier on. It is the way, it's an African setting. It's the African setting. Like you said, it's a worldwide stuff, but it's an African setting. You have men on one side, women on one side. But we are speaking about the men themselves. Even the men on one side, how deep do they go in their conversations? How do they open up? I found out that when I was growing up, opening up was a way of exposing yourself and giving people ammunition to fire at you, right? So if you're weak, or if you are, feel like crying and so on, you go and you hide somewhere and you cry, and then you wipe and you come back. You are macho, but there is no connection between the men. There is no, the masks are always there. The masks are always put there. And that is in the traditional African setting, where you just find guys locking arms, guys speaking into each other's hearts, someone exposing his fears to another, right? I have a crush on that girl, and so on and so forth. Stuff like that, seldom.
Okay, and on that note, for people who are listening to us and they're wondering, okay, what are these guys talking about? We are talking about being unmasked and unashamed. In a world like we are today, where it is a requirement for one to wear a mask to avoid COVID, have you considered that there are subliminal masks, invisible masks, and facades that people are wearing to hide their true nature? And even as we come back from the break, we are going to talk about where does a man go and how can a man deal with some of these issues.
All right, we'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Nabuguzi Chwanuka, and I am the podcast host of Hashtime with Nabuguzi Chwanuka. Hashtime with Nabuguzi Chwanuka is for the most part a millennial platform where we help you unravel social constructs, discuss self-development in line with mental health, and everything in between that directly or indirectly affects us in the millennial world around us. The podcast is a virtual home for you who is not scared of being a better version of yourself, even if it requires you to contradict who you were 24 hours ago. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Castbox, Google Podcasts, Amazon, or any other podcast platform of your choice. And on social media, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'd be glad to have you as one of us.
All right, we're back after the break. We're talking about unmasking, for men to unmask themselves and to be real one with another. And of course, we are hosting Nabuguzi Chwanuka. We are here with also the Solution Gonzi at the Loft. Let's continue with this interesting conversation.
So let me use the example that we all understand. Everyone right now has to wear a mask.
Yeah.
And today I was watching a documentary about China and artificial intelligence. And there's this company that had developed an artificial intelligence system to surveil their country, because their country is surveilled significantly. Now, last year, their algorithm hit a snag. Because all of a sudden now it could not identify people. You know why couldn't it identify people? Because people are wearing masks.
Right.
Oh.
Right.
You get? So they had to go back and take pictures of themselves. These are now the workers. Take pictures of themselves with masks,
on.
and without masks, and then teach the computers again how to identify people beyond the masks. And that brings me to this. Jesus said that the eyes are the soul, are the windows to the soul, and woe to him whose eyes have been darkened. Yeah. And you asked me, so how do men come to a place of being unmasked?
Yeah.
And the same way, right now, when you take off your mask and you are in public, what happens is you become vulnerable.
Right.
To
COVID.
Yeah.
To COVID.
Yeah.
And now this is where I want to use or to introduce the 3 V's of unmasking. The first one, is to allow yourself to be vulnerable as a man. And we talked about it the last time, that vulnerability is not weakness. Vulnerability makes you a candidate for help.
But the question is, to whom am I going to be vulnerable?
The question starts with, am I willing to be vulnerable? And you see, I totally agree with what you're saying, because I personally have been in a place in my life a couple of years ago where I was going through depression and addictions, and I was really in a place where I was wondering, whom do I talk to?
Yeah.
Whom do I tell about this wolf in my life? You know?
Yeah.
How do I tell somebody that I cannot sleep unless I've consumed half a liter of whiskey every day? And this was what was going on, and whom do I talk to?
And you know very well that that's not what you want to do.
Exactly.
But you can't help but.
Because I had no one to talk to.
Yeah.
And I was blessed that God sent my father to get me onto the journey of going to see a psychiatrist. And
Yeah.
And that it took humility, like we've mentioned, to be vulnerable enough to accept that help.
Yeah.
So it starts with being vulnerable. And
do you think we have a safe space of men being vulnerable in church, safe counseling, just church circles?
I've always asked this question. I'm waiting for someone to answer.
Why are you saying no? Why are you saying
is there an office in the church where a hurting man
I want
can
to hear
go
why
and get
she's saying no with an emphatic no.
No.
What do you mean?
The church, for the most part, does not really understand mental health.
Or men?
Maybe even the men. I mean, if you're drawing from church and God is masculine and God is all power and God is all seeing, it becomes hard for them to understand how you are not all seeing and not all powerful.
You know, guys, we might be wrong here, and I think we need to give an opportunity to a man out there who might have found refuge in a church. Not necessarily a church building, but just the church as an institution.
Generally speaking, a church is not something that someone would really rely on. But there are some exceptions. Like, there is a general rule, there are exceptions.
Right.
There are some churches that have come to a place of acknowledging that men need spaces to be spoken to. But in most cases, even when you see gatherings of men at church, they're talking about money.
So that makes me ask, why then do men leave church to go to bars and brothels?
That's why I was saying
what is not in the church.
That's why I was saying earlier on. Probably the three of us are biased, and I would like us to give an opportunity to a man out there who has found refuge in church. You are messed up. You know, you're out there, you are wounded and you're weak and so on. And you went and you found refuge in church. If there's such a man, you can send us an email on solidjamas@gmail.com. Solidjamas is SOLIDJAA. No.
Is it double J?
JAMAAZ. So you can send us an email on solidjamas@gmail.com and tell us about the refuge that you found in the church. So we were still talking about.
I want to first
Where?
that me, I'm non-biased. I say there is an exception.
No. That's being. Okay, I said maybe we are biased. We don't know. We don't know that.
Let
we can be proven wrong.
let me try and qualify this statement. All this discussion we're having. Whatever the church has done is clearly not enough.
Yeah.
Or they don't know how to do it, or they don't understand men. But also, we've mentioned the brokenness that has been covered up in the church. So the church is also behind the mask.
Right.
Yeah. So you have a pastor who is dealing with homosexuality. You have a pastor who's dealing with drugs. You have a pastor when you hear a pastor committing suicide, like has happened in the past couple of years, how do you feel? When a pastor commits suicide, should tell you that the church cannot help.
Is it because the idea of being vulnerable is not, there's no platform for vulnerability?
It's not so much a platform as much as a culture.
But the culture has indicated
that if our pastor wakes up in the morning and says, "Church, I just want to confess something," and everyone's there is like, "What's the pastor going to say?"
I watched pornography last night.
I'm a man, and part of being a man means I struggle with pornography. Part of being a man means I like the deacon's wife.
Part of being a man?
No, as part of his struggles as a man.
Okay.
Yeah? He likes the deacon's wife, or that he has something going on with what do you think is going to happen in
Hold on. Why will he do that in the first place? Why will he?
We were talking about unmasking.
I do not think that will be that will be the forum for him to unmask.
So this is what I'm telling you.
Yeah.
That which forum does he have?
All right.
To actually stand up so I'm talking about the culture of vulnerability. And that is why we talked about Jesus on the cross, and people misunderstand, because when they look at that scene of Jesus on the cross, they see it through the eyes of Hollywood. Jesus was on that cross naked.
Was he ashamed?
Who?
Of course, that causes shame.
Of who?
Of who?
Or of what?
Of his sense of being a human being.
No, this is the thing. He knew that this was
That
going to
he
happen.
knew.
That's why it was hard for him to accept it. To accept to be vulnerable and put himself out there, naked and unashamed, so that his love then can cover up the rest.
So he was ashamed, but
he faced
shame,
but was not ashamed.
He had signed up for it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
You see, being ashamed,
But that's different, man. Jesus
It
is
is
Jesus.
different.
as in when you look at Jesus, you need to see Jesus as a man.
I think where we want to go as far as unmasking or exploring emotional being or an emotional self as a man is when we get to him in the Garden of Gethsemane.
Yeah.
Him talking to God and say, "This cup is too much for me.
Yeah.
If it be your will, take it away from me."
Yeah.
But do we know how to pray?
Yeah.
You know, so if
we know how to ask for help.
Right. That's a very great way to look at it.
Yeah.
While we want to build these horizontal relationships, do we have a vertical relationship?
Yeah.
Because if we have none of that,
Right.
you don't. You're left on your own.
So
Right.
that is a spanner in the works in a world that is currently censoring God out of their conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they wonder why their world is getting
Yeah.
worse and worse.
Yeah.
So I keep telling people, just because you do not believe in God does not negate His existence.
Yeah.
So you have to deal with your own foolishness on your own time. Yeah, I'll just leave that one to hang. So now you see, in Gethsemane, is Jesus facing the shame and the pain, and the Bible says, but for the glory
Said before him.
He looked beyond it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He despised the shame. Actually,
Thank
that's
you.
the word